Imagine if you were playing an important playoff game, but before you even started, the other team was already winning 35-9. Believe it or not, that's exactly the scenario the Saskatchewan Roughriders found themselves in on November 11th, 1963. You see, the CFL's playoff format used to be very different and pretty unthinkable when compared with the current format in 2024. The league had different playoff formats for the different divisions, and the West's was significantly more complicated, long, and tiring for the players compared to the East. The CFL had been established 5 years earlier in 1958. Prior to that was the Canadian Football Council in 1956. And prior to that, the ancestors of the East and West divisions, the IRFU and the WIFU, were the two dominant leagues in the country. Since they were two different leagues, it didn't matter as much that they had different playoff formats. And when they eventually became their respective CFL divisions, the league opted to keep their old playoff formats. So what did those formats look like? Well, the East's was more straightforward. A semi-final whose winner advanced to a 2-game total points final against the best team in the division. In other words, the score from both final games would be added up to determine the winner. The West used a 2-game total points semifinal, whose winner would face the best team in the division in a best 2 out of 3 final. By today's standards, that's ridiculous. That meant that the Eastern team in the Grey Cup could have won 1 game to make it, but the West team may have needed to play 5 games. But regardless, that's what they did. And the 7-7-2 Roughriders were slated to play the 10-4-2 Stampeders in the 2-game total point 1963 West semifinal. Considering their records, Calgary was certainly the favored club, and Game 1, which I don't have footage of, certainly helped prove the Saskatchewan faithful wrong, as the Stamps rolled to a dominant 35-9 victory in front of their home fans. It's safe to say that people were fairly pessimistic about Game 2, so let's see how it went. Saskatchewan kicked off to Calgary. After a pretty uneventful drive, the Riders got it back, and on the second play of their first offensive possession, ran a sleeper play, with a wide-open Ray Purdon hauling in a pass from Lancaster for the touchdown. They had set the tone early. Their deficit was now cut to 19. After some punts on failed possessions, the Stamps got into scoring range, but the Riders forced a third down. Calgary's kicker Larry Robinson missed a chip-shot 19-yard field goal, but the Riders conceded it for a single, making the lead 20. The Riders marched from their own 25, partially thanks to this penalty that I can't identify based on the ref's hand signals. And the drive ended with a 26-yard TD pass to Ed Buchanan, but unfortunately for the Riders, the convert was blocked. It's a 2-score game now, though. In the second quarter, the Stamps would opt to punt for a single instead of trying a long field goal, and they got the point off the toe of Jim Furlong. The Rough Riders got the ball back, but were forced to punt, and Calgary tried preventing an immediate tackle by lateraling, but it didn't work. A few plays later, Calgary threw an interception and the Riders had the ball back. But then a few plays after that, Lancaster threw a deep shot that was picked off by the Stampeders. A couple punts later, the Stampeders again decided to punt for a single rather than try a long field goal. It was now a 16-point, 38-22 lead in the second quarter. After a few more offensive plays for the Riders, Lancaster got picked off again. But the Stamps couldn't get anything going offensively, so they punted to the Riders, who bobbled it but recovered it deep in their own zone. They marched down the field, and Lancaster threw a pass to Buchanan again that was incomplete, but Harvey Wiley of the Stamps was flagged for pass interference, and the Riders got a first down at the 2-yard line. On the last play of the half, Lancaster tossed the ball to Dick Cohey, but the conversion was missed. The scoreboard operator mistakenly awarded a point, perhaps confusing it with a single on a missed field goal, but the mistake was fixed by the second half. The score was 38-28 going into halftime. On the Rough Riders' opening possession of the third quarter, Lancaster threw an interception, his third one, this time to Calgary's Art Johnson, and it was returned into the red zone. The Stamps attempted another short field goal, only 22 yards, and it was wide again for another single, 39-28. But then, Buchanan was the hero again, as Lancaster dropped back and dumped a screen pass to him, which was caught at midfield and ran all the way in for the TD. This time, the convert was good. And it was now 39-35 with 8:24 left in the third, an eternity, and they were only within 4. The Rough Riders eventually got the ball back and were forced to punt to Calgary, who fumbled the ball, with Saskatchewan recovering. After a sack and an incomplete pass, the Riders decided to go for it on third down since they were losing by 4. The play didn't work, and to be honest, I'm not sure if I agree with the call to run that play. Even if you try a field goal and it misses, as long as you kick it far enough, you're making it a 3-point game. But regardless, the Stamps had the ball back. Again, they couldn't get anything going offensively and punted. The Rough Riders marched downfield again thanks to a run by George Reed, and then Lancaster hit Cohey again in the very farthest back part of the end zone, right by the fence for the touchdown. The Stamps this time were able to move the ball down the field, and on the first play of the fourth quarter, their fullback Earl Munsford ran it in for the major. Surprisingly, the convert was good, 46-42 Calgary. The Stamps made an interesting decision to try a short kick on the ensuing kickoff. Again, not a call I find myself agreeing with. They don't need to come back, and judging by how poorly their offense had been playing, a Saskatchewan score was not exactly a minor inconvenience. Miraculously, Saskatchewan threw an interception on a screen pass, and the Stamps were in great field position once more. However, that was short-lived, as a 3rd-and-1 gamble did not work, and once again the Riders had the ball back. But a punt later, and the Stamps were back with the ball in their own territory. But then they too were forced to punt to the Riders. But then the Riders were forced to punt, and it was blocked. The least the Stamps needed to do was kick a field goal to make it a 7-point game, and as it turned out, they were held to a 3rd down. So Robinson again tried a short field goal of 23 yards, and he missed again for another single, 47-42. The Riders needed a touchdown badly, but there were still 4 minutes and 24 seconds left, so Calgary had plenty of opportunity to score. Lancaster hit Dick Cohey again for a 44-yard gain. He took a deep shot on the next play, incomplete, but Doug Elmore of Calgary was charged with pass interference, which set up George Reed's 10-yard touchdown run to take the lead. The Riders made the conversion, but in typical Saskatchewan fashion had too many men on the field, and so the score remained 48-47 with quite a bit of time left on the clock, 3 minutes and 24 seconds. On Calgary's offensive possession came a super controversial play. What do you think happened here? Well, to any normal person, this is an incomplete pass, but the refs ruled it was a turnover and a Saskatchewan first down. The public was so confused that the CFL's commissioner, Sidney Halter, had to explain it to newspapers in the days after. Here's what he said. The Calgary player never touched the ball. It bounced off his head into the hands of the Saskatchewan defender, who fumbled it into the end zone. The Saskatchewan player then ran the ball out of the end zone. If the Saskatchewan player had been tackled in the end zone, Calgary would have been awarded 2 points for a safety touch. As you can imagine, I also strongly disagree with this call. First of all, imagine if the Stamps had tackled him. They would have taken a 49-48 lead, which would have had massive implications for the game's ending. But I don't see how the Saskatchewan defender ever managed to have possession of the ball here. Regardless, it was a new set of downs for Lancaster's offense. The Riders, after another near safety, were forced to punt from their end zone. The Stamps were thinking about one thing and one thing only. We need a field goal attempt. Even if Robinson missed, a point was all that was needed for a tie, and the first overtime game in Western CFL playoff history. As expected, Robinson missed from 34 yards out. The ball didn't make it out of the end zone. The Riders tried running it out, but at the last second opted to punt it out. The ball bounced, and Larry Robinson picked it back up, tried getting a clear path to the end zone, but couldn't. His desperation punt back in was short and went out of bounds. The crowd went absolutely wild and stormed the field. The Riders won a playoff series for the first time since the founding of the CFL. The game was dubbed the Little Miracle, but celebrations weren't over yet. If they wanted to make it to the Grey Cup, they had to beat BC in the best-of-3 series. They managed to split the first 2 games, but the Lions won Game 3 36-1, and the Little Miracle was miraculous but ultimately didn't change much about who played in the Grey Cup that year. When the Riders returned home from BC, they were greeted by 2,000 cheering fans at the airport. The Little Miracle has largely fallen into obscurity, especially since a film of it was not uncovered until I bought it. The broadcast of this game is also lost, but hopefully the memory of this legendary comeback will endure for seasons to come.